So, good evening. They say tomorrow night is a full moon. こんなすごいことになってるのに、この月にしたいってない確かに。Proof of my age. These glasses at this distance are not working for me. I need the glasses that are for old people. I'm Marc Lowe. I'm exhausted, and yet I had this strange urge to do a talk video. Why is that? I lectured for 300-minute periods today. I talked about Sherwood Anderson and Winesburg, Ohio, 1919, and then came forward into the 20th century in 1986 or thereabouts, 85, 86, 87, City of Glass in particular, New York trilogy, and Paul Auster, talking about Paul Auster, the man, the writer, the poet, the translator, and then another lecture on Auster, but the next 100 minutes was focused on his 2002 novel, Book of Illusions. Maybe I should use those glasses after all. So, yeah. Am I doing a music talk? Am I doing a literature talk or a life talk? And who are these talks for in the end? They're for me. I could be like Hector Mann in Auster's novel from 2002. Hector Mann was a fictitious character who was in silent films in the 1920s, and after his career basically ended, he disappeared from public view, and eventually he ended up, again it's fiction, but he ended up filming a number of things, movies, films, on his own, with his wife. But the idea behind it is that no one would ever see the films, even though he himself realized that they were extremely, say, high quality, that he had obtained a certain level of mastery over the medium, but yet there was no intention of publishing or sharing with any public. And like Kafka, when he died, the idea was he entrusted to his wife, as Kafka did to Max Brod, in Kafka's case, his manuscripts, and said, burn these. Max Brod did not burn them. And in this novel, the wife is then supposed to destroy the videos so that nobody ever sees them. ... I won't tell the end, but the idea behind it is that this kind of relates to my last talk on why make art, because I think from Auster's perspective, and in that novel, what the narrator David Zimmerman says is, I think it was Zimmerman or someone says to him who's relating this in the novel, is, what great restraint Hector Mann must have had to want to make films that he knew were of extreme high quality but not released into a public and not share them in any way, that they were made without any intention of sharing them with anyone ever. Just to, it was, you know, you make it for, it's an end in itself. The act itself is the reason for doing it. And the end product is for oneself and not for anyone else. So I pose the question, rhetorically maybe, perhaps rhetorically, to myself, who are these videos for? And I answered my own question, not rhetorically, maybe, perhaps they're just for myself, in which case there's absolutely no need for me to put them on my YouTube page. And yet I do, usually. I've done talks that I've not put on the YouTube page, by the way. And there are a few that I put up and they were gone the next day because I didn't want to keep them up. So, but essentially they're for me. You know, in the beginning it was like, let me talk about my tetralogy. It started in the summer of 2021 during the COVID pandemic when I found myself alone, but maybe not wanting to be alone, but sort of just being alone, and the talks were an outlet, but also they were a way for me to advertise the music I was making. 2 years plus later, because we're now moving into October and the fall is coming, autumn. And I started those, I think, in the spring of 2021, and the last ones I did were, I think, in the summer when I completed the tetralogy, so it's over 2 years. And I've aged 2 years, and I'm 50 now. I was 48 then. I want to talk about age as well. Maybe that's the theme of my talk, aging, which, you know, leads inevitably to the D word, eventually, which I've talked about many times on this page. Usually I talk about making music, but, well, yes, sure, I can talk about the fact that I've made all these new things, but that goes back to the Hector Mon thing, and he was a filmographer or a director, whatever, but the same thing, he was an artist. Why make art? It's my last talk again, except I'm not going to talk at length about Bowie's Outsider, the Minotaur, or even my Minotaur project, which I did, in fact, complete, and which is now on this page. You can find it easily enough in audio. And I made one video, actually, kind of spontaneously, which ended up being the opening track on the album. But who is it for, ultimately? You know? Even for Melville, Kafka, we're talking about literature, right? I mean, I don't think David Bowie, for example, to talk about musician, like he was making music for himself. You could argue that he started out that way, or that he was in the end doing that. Certainly Black Star is very personal, but, you know, you say, but he was, you know, he was doing live shows, and he was, you know, how many times did he perform changes for the fans, right? Was that for himself, or no? But in one of Bowie's talks, a rather important talk, I think, is the one where he talks, and if you're an avid Bowie fan, if you've watched a lot of interviews and things, you may know this one. I don't remember whether this clip was in Moon Age Daydream. I think it was as well in the documentary, or whatever you want to call that film. It's a kind of art documentary. Don't write music or make art in order to please some public, right? The crowd. I forget the wording he used. Don't pander to the crowd. It wasn't pander, it wasn't the word, but...
Never play to the gallery.
And he said this, and as part of this interview, which I think was 1997 or thereabouts, he had that kind of earthling hair, red hair, and he was about my age, actually, 50 years old, when he said this, fairly late in his career, you could say, right? And he said it takes years to realize it, but go back to why you started making art. And you realize that you did it because you had passion for it. You had this burning flame within you that propelled you to make the art. That was the source of it, right? The beginning and that's where it comes from. And sometimes we get bogged down or we forget this in the attempt to want to be seen or heard or whatever. If heard if you're making music, or seen if you're on the big screen or displaying your paintings, or read if you're an author or whatever. I'm talking also about authors in literature. I'm going to go back to Paul Auster, one of the video clips I showed in one of the two classes. Actually, I showed the clip in both of the classes, I think. There's a short interview where he's asked, what advice do you give to young writers?
I suppose a kind of egotism, self-importance, inability to look out of themselves.
And he said, basically, he says, don't let your ego run amok. Don't take yourself too seriously, and realize that if you want to do this thing, and I think it applies equally to musicians and other forms of sort of like being in the arts. What were the three words were? Solitude. You'll be poor. You won't have money. You'll be solitary. You'll be alone. Doing this, and you won't get recognition or something like that. And he said, and if you're okay with those three things, not having money, being sort of alone a lot of the time, and not being recognized or not getting sort of the accolades you think you deserve, particularly when you're young, then that means you have that burning flame, that thing inside you, then by all means do it, because you have no other choice.
Don't be a writer. It's a terrible way to live your life. There's nothing to be gained from it but poverty and obscurity and solitude.
But it's not like a great way to do. And Bowie says too in that interview where he talks about, maybe it was another interview about, like, it was a different interview, actually, it was later. And I think it was Charlie Rose. And Bowie said, to make art or to be an artist is kind of to be a little bit cracked and a little bit off, a little bit wonky.
Madness out of family.
I think I've often wondered if actually being an artist in any way, any nature, is a kind of a sign of a certain kind of dysfunction, a social dysfunctionalism anyway. It's an extraordinary thing to want to do, to express yourself in such rarefied terms.
It's like all the madmen, right? His half-brother Terry was farther off that end of the spectrum, but that the artist is teetering on the edge of that. And I talked about this in the last talk with the Minotaur. I don't want to go back to that ground so much in the same way tonight, but and Bowie goes on to say that the same thing to do, or the smart thing to do, is to settle down, have a family, have a steady, good job, provide for your family, provide for yourself, live a stable life, and go off. And I'm not so sure that Bowie actually believed that himself. I don't think he did. He didn't live that way, certainly. And of course, he's arguing for the fact that, well, the artist is the one who doesn't take that path, but that path would be logically the better path. But I don't know that he really believed that logically that would even be the better path. Just that more people, perhaps, percentage-wise, take that path, those who even have a choice, who are privileged enough to have the choice to take that path, or the path of the artist, or whatever it is. I guess you could say. There are various angles to this, but and then Bowie goes on to talk about like having different colored plates, that if you just want to use a plate as a plate for utility, you could have just a regular plain white plate and that's enough. So why design plates in different colors and with different designs, or why have carpets with different designs on them, or toilet covers or whatever? Okay, whatever it is, that is a human thing to want to have that variety. Like the covers behind me and all the colors I used, and some are black and white, but some are very colorful, and there's no point to any of this, right? I mean, utilitarian wise, it's just decoration on my walls. It's stuff that I made. It has some meaning to me because it's stuff that I made, and when I look at it, I am reminded of the work that I've done. And this is not just over the period of 1 year, okay? This is over a period of at least 2 or 3 years, this wall. It goes back at least to, basically it goes back to 2021 in the tetralogy, and then stuff from last year, 2022, and then this year's more recent stuff, including the Minotaur, which I just completed up here. And on the opposite wall, and this wall here too, I have this Dark Shroud stuff from this year. And Red Signals, which is another recent solo album. And my 3 idols, and they're all gone. Sakamoto first, then David Bowie, and then Jeff Buckley, who, I guess the one who died when he was the oldest is Sakamoto. He's on the top. Bowie died at 69. I guess he was a little bit older than Sakamoto, but he died younger. And Jeff Buckley died at the age of 30, unfortunately. Which brings me back to aging. Not in the case of Buckley so much, because he didn't have a chance to age so much. But certainly Bowie and Sakamoto got up there a little bit. And the D word, which I don't want to dwell on it, but going back again, I'm kind of playing off of this thing, because today I lectured on Auster and showed these video clips, these interviews, and in another interview, which was also with Charlie Rose, interestingly enough, I mentioned Charlie Rose and David Bowie. That was a totally separate thing. He was also on the Charlie Rose show talking about the Book of Illusions in 2002. That's why I showed this clip to my class. My university students who are studying English through literature. He said a very interesting thing, and I think he was older than this at the time, but he said, when I turned 50, my perspective of life completely changed. And what he said is, and it's interesting, he used the word ghosts, which he had written a play called Blackouts, which then became Ghosts as part of the New York trilogy, the second of 3. Sambusaku, it's like Bowie's Berlin trilogy, right? New York trilogy. And that's Ghosts, and it's about living with ghosts in various meanings of that word. It could be used metaphorically in various ways. Ghosts. He said when I turned 50, he used that word. He said I'm living with more ghosts because some percentage of people, I don't remember, I think he said half almost, that sounds like too many for a 50-year-old, but some number of people that were my friends, or maybe he was referencing family members or relatives or something too, but people that I knew or was close to or have passed on. So those are the ghosts in my life. And one begins to think about one's own mortality more when one reaches the age of 50, and of course beyond, because, well, you realize what's behind you, maybe more behind you than what's ahead of you, unless you're going to live to be over 100, and even in that case, you're likely not going to be healthy enough to kind of enjoy it the way you did during the first 50 years. You know, not in infancy, I guess, but... So, it was interesting that, you know, I mean, this clip that I showed, because, I mean, I'm 50 this year, and my viewpoint has certainly changed. I had been in my 40s, I suppose, I thought about these things and certainly thought about death. I mean, the song Red Signals, like I mentioned, this new release, Red Signals album. I mean, the song Red Signals I wrote the lyrics for and did my first recording of in 2017.
So how would you like to die? How would you like to die? Where would you like to go?
That's 6 years ago. So, you know, I mean, wasn't yet in my mid-40s when I wrote that, but I was over 40. So, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I took a course in Japan, when I was studying abroad in Japan for the first time, on Death and Dying in East Asia was the title. I'll never forget that. So, the other thing is, right now I seem to be in relatively good health. I had some issues and I actually resolved some of them, fortunately. But then, you know, it's like the Buddha once said, when one problem goes away, another problem will come in to replace it. You're always going to be challenged with something. And certainly as we age, we'll be challenged. So I've been having, I think something I've had this issue for a long time, but you know, this gnashing of my jaw and my teeth at night when I'm sleeping. So I've been trying to rectify this, but I actually have like a slight lisp now, I feel, because my teeth hurt. It makes you think about, you know, permanence and impermanence. There is no permanence. Not one's teeth, not one's body or health or anything. Like Auster says, you turn 50 and you start thinking more and more about these things, your perspective kind of shifts. And in a way, it's a positive shift because it makes you realize what you maybe realized as a more abstract concept when you were younger, as a reality. Whether or not, you know, there's an earthquake, whether or not there's a war, whatever. Even under a so-called ideal situation, you're still going to age, you're still going to have health issues at some point, you're still going to suffer, and you're still going to die. Not to be glum. And the suffering part, you know, how you suffer is, in the positive sense, to say that if you approach that in a particular way, you may suffer a bit less, and that's why I sort of connect with Buddhist ideas so strongly, and I have actually since my late teens, early 20s, before I could speak a single word of Japanese or read a single character, Chinese character, you know, Japanese kanji, because the less we attach, the less we suffer. The less we cling, the less we suffer. I think that's an intrinsic truth. The Stoics say the same. The Taoists of ancient China said the same, and the Hindus, okay? The Hindu religions, whichever, or philosophies of yoga, always saying the same thing. And people who live long and healthy lives, they say, you know, just watched, forget where it was somewhere in the US. They were interviewing the oldest, they were all women for some reason. They were all over 100, and 100 or over. And what's your secret? What's your secret? And it was like, well, I'm interested in life. I'm interested in things. I don't hold grudges. I don't get jealous. I live my life. It's cool, kind of thing, you know? They'll say the same thing. It's a kind of way of not attaching, isn't it? If you attach, you want people to be a certain way for you, then you're going to suffer when they're not. That's attachment too. So to just chill and, you know, accept everyone as they are, and, you know, continue to be interested in life and stuff, then maybe we can live a long and healthy life. I have no idea why I'm grinding the teeth. I've got to figure this one out. Because I don't feel particularly stressed right now, as I used to be. And I'm not particularly anxious about things the way I was in the past. So maybe it's also that realization that, you know, things are finite, and you just got to make the best of every day. I wrote a song about making the best of every day in 2018, when at that time I was not so stable and happy in my own life. But yet, those lyrics came out of me. Today we are alive.
Make the best of every day.
Make the best of every day. So, now I'm actually realizing or actualizing that in my life at the age of 50. I have some issues. Everyone has issues. But they don't sort of press upon me the way they once used to. And I think aging is helping with that. And another thing is interesting, that people these days seem to think that I'm younger than I am. This is water. I think it's just that I'm enjoying music and teaching, and it's cool. I don't need to be famous or rich to make the best of every day, and no one knows what tomorrow is going to bring. I've got all this work I've done, and I did it for me, and I'm talking tonight for me, basically. And if anyone who watches this gets anything from it, out of it, that's maybe positive, then it will have been worth posting it to this page, right? So just, you know, live your life. I guess at the end I could mention new releases, but does anyone actually care about that? Except me. I've done a number of things. I did the Minotaur piece for Bowie's Outside. It's been published now, also on Apple Music and so on. And the new This Dark Shroud, The Signs Were There, is coming, but I also did a kind of experimental remix version. It's not remixing individual songs. I actually combined stems, vocal stems, in some cases like some piano from Broken Glass, for example, or other things, and added elements, new elements, sort of ambient clicks and pops and noises and some melody. and created 4 kind of palimpsests, or some of them are palimpsests, and well, they are palimpsests in a way, like layers of things with new elements too. And I'm kind of happy with it. It's not melodic or easy listening, but somebody might listen and think it's cool. So anyway, it's on BandCamp. So there's that. It's another new thing that hasn't been published to this page yet. And another new thing I did is a 30-minute collaborative track that I made using only recordings that I had made of another artist whose music I like, and he's a friend, but we hadn't performed together before, ever. I've used him on other things, Katakamuii, and he's featured on some tracks on recent solo releases. Those two were made from recordings I had done of him and combining with elements of my own. And this I did the same, but it's a lengthy 30-minute piece of mostly him sort of improvising live, and then on top of that, it starts with some improvised piano, and then I added beats at one point, because his music never has beats when he performs live. It's just ambient sort of guitar with effectors. So there are beats in there, and like I said, the piano, and I used some other sounds from the calculator that I had used, and acoustic, and at the end, my piece, acoustic and vocal piece, I'll Take You Home, comes in at the end with his kind of ambient guitar.
Well, I'll take you home, and I'll walk you back.
And so it goes through phases of sort of ambient or noise, ambient noise. He's very influenced by post-rock, so it's got kind of a post-rock-ish feel. It's mostly instrumental till the very end, where I'm singing just a bit. And that's Marc, Lowe, and Katakamuii. And I called it... What did I call it? A meeting... An improvisatory meeting, that's what I called it. I was going to look it up. An improvisatory meeting. We didn't actually meet to make the recording, and that's the irony of it. But it's a meeting of our sound and styles. And coming off of that now, I'll make an announcement next month, October 17th, I think it's a Tuesday, in Shimokitazawa, Katakamuii, his name is Kohei, and I will actually be performing together for the first time. It's what we call a 2-man live in Japan. 1-man would be just one artist doing the whole show. 2-man means just the two of us, no other artists. So I'll do solo for 40 minutes. He'll do solo for 40 minutes. And then together we're going to do a long improv for the first time. For basically, we're allotted like an hour. So it's going to be cool. It'll be abstract. No idea what that's going to be, but that's cool. And then on the 28th of October, after that, I'm the organizer, which is unusual, because I don't normally do that, for an event in Jimbocho at Sangatsu no Mizu, which is he does curries, but it's also a bar cafe and music bar cafe, with 4 other members. And it's going to be all improv stuff. I'm putting people together with other people they've never performed with to do improvs on the spot, and I'll be participating too. I'll do a set myself as this Dark Shroud, and then at the end everyone will perform together. So I have 2 live things coming up, and they're both kind of unique. They're not regular bookings with other, bands, which I often do those things, and they're cool. But these are both kind of special, organized events with specific members and specific genre, I guess you could say. They're both actually going to be quite improvisatory. Though I may do I think I'll do some songs in both cases, but I'll also do improv stuff and collaborative with other people. It's over 30 minutes. I started the talk by telling you or the camera or whatever that I was exhausted, and after teaching 300-minute sections talking about first the Industrial Revolution and the concept of the grotesque in Winesburg, Ohio, and then talking about the Auster, both the City of Glass and the trilogy, New York trilogy, and then the Book of Illusions, and came home and I'm pretty tired. But tomorrow I have the day to myself, basically. Maybe I'll do some music stuff. And then starting on Monday, the other university where I'm teaching will also begin, and I'm doing David Bowie seminars, plural. Actually, I'm doing 3 Bowie seminars this semester, 2 at one university and a 3rd at another university for the first time. So that's pretty cool. And it's like combined, I think I have something like 150 students in the Bowie classes combined, so it's pretty cool. It's a lot of grading for me though. A lot of essays coming, so I better wear those old man glasses and do my grades when the time comes. So that's my talk tonight. I think over the 30-minute mark is quite enough for tonight. And I'm tired, but you know, I want to wake up with teeth in my mouth too, so gotta be careful of that. Nothing's permanent. The sooner one realizes that, not just as a sort of concept, but as a reality, the easier things get. You don't take yourself so seriously, you don't take things so seriously, and your stress levels will drop if you get to this point. And I think being 50 for me has helped me to realize that. When you're 30 or 20, even in the 40s, it doesn't quite hit home until you turn 50. You start to realize it a little bit more. So it comes closer to home. That's it, isn't it? What else do I have to say? That's good. Thanks if you're watching. See you again soon. Namaste, namaskar. I'm not religious, but I say peace, and see you next time.